yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Welcome to Against the Grain, where curiosity leads the way.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I put together this series really because this is my 30th crop circle season, and I wanted to look back and focus on the several themes which keep on emerging. And this first lecture is about the circle. I'm not qualified to talk about crop, but I'm qualified to talk about the circle. And so the first lecture is about the circle and eventually, as you'll see, the quintuplet. Now, I want to start each of these 4 lectures with strangeness, because the one thing that we need to remind ourselves about is just how strange the idea of these brilliant, precise, elegant, meaningful markings are in the field. The world averts its eyes, as it normally does, with strangeness. And here, to open this first one, is a circle of sheep. Now, this event, this phenomenon, is strange, inexplicable. There are always, when confronted with this kind of weirdness, there are always explanologists who arrive either with shoehorns or sledgehammers to batter it into some sort of shape. They look at that. The most common thing, the most common explanation is that the farmers have put feed out in a precise geometric circle to bring the sheep into line. Now, I've got another photo. This photograph is somewhere around here in the southwest. I don't know exactly where. I've got another one in the north of Scotland, a similar perfect linear geometric circle. First of all, what farmer has got time, energy, or imagination to form a perfect geometric circle of sheep? Second of all, how does he tell the sheep not to cluster, but to stand singly in a perfect line? It's a wonderful mystery, it's a wonderful strangeness. Next one, please. And here is a simple early circle showing the way the ground lay is normally swirled. Next slide. Next slide. Another one, a larger one. Again, you can see the way it's swirled. Next slide. This is one of a series of circles, I think over 40, and they were last year. And the thing about this sequence of circles, repeated massively, is that every single one of them was exactly the same. It was impossible to discern one from the other. They were all flawlessly produced as though banged out by a metal mold. They say, it has been said, God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose perimeter is nowhere. Next slide. That's one with many circles. Every single one of these formations is as perfectly stamped out as though by a steel mold. They're perfect. Next slide. Now, this was very interesting in that the center circle, the circle between the petals, was absolutely perfectly circular, and the average crop circle is oval. This was the only occasion in which I've measured perfect circularity. I took measurements in 3 separate directions, and they were all to an inch, exactly the same. This is very rare. More often than not, the circle has no center, and it is slightly oval. And though a perfect circle has a center, an oval has usually 4 different centers geometrically. Next slide. This is Black Elk. Black Elk was a poet and wise man who said several things. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing and always come back to where they were. Everything the power of the world does is done in the circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round, like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind, in its greatest power, whirls. Birds make their nest in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The Wasi Jews, that's the white people, us, we're Wasi Jews, have put us in these square boxes. Our power is gone, and we are dying for the power is not in us anymore. You can look at our boys and see how it is with us. When we were living by the power of the circle in the way we should, boys were men at 12 and 13. But now it takes them very much longer to mature. Well, it is as it is. We are prisoners of war while we are waiting here, but there is another world. Now, what is very important is that the circle, which is so crucial to us, you look around you, wherever you are, and we're living in right angles. And yet, wherever you are, you look around, you will see at least 10 or 12 circles. And it's interesting that our developed culture has shrugged off the circle to a large extent. We still have an enormous number of circles. That fire alarm is circular. This bottle is circular. The clock on the end of the wall is circular. And if you look around your homes, there are all kinds of circles, but it is dominated by the way our consciousness clonks towards the right angle. What is about 3 inches by about 2 inches? You all have one. A credit card. It's interesting, you know, there are 1 million credit cards, you're all carrying one, they are rectangles. And what, at a larger scale, is about 40 feet by about 10 foot by 10 foot in 3 dimensions. The container on which our civilization now depends. All our consumables arrive in containers. They're not right, they're not round. We clonk, we spike into the orthogonal in our culture. Okay. Next slide, please. This is very important. Here is a compass with which you draw circles, and it defines 2 things. Number 1, the point, which marks the red center of the circle, and the green is the radius, the distance between the point at the center and the pencil at the outer edge. These 2 things, these 2 elements, the center and the radius, location and dimension, are absolutely crucial for circularity. And what is remarkable about the way crop circles manifest is that it is very rare that the center of the swirl of a crop circle is actually the geometric center of the circle itself. Something else is going on. They, the crop circle makers, the crop circle manifestors, understand something beyond the geometry. They're able to produce their circle without defining the center. And this is something which has frustrated me for 30 years. I mean, how could they do this? I mean, everything, every circle we know, at some point, must have defined a center, location, and a radius, dimension. Even if you take something like a dinner plate, at some point before the manufacture of the dinner plate, someone must have designed the circle to make the mold, which means he had to find a point to stick his compass in and a dimension to define the outside. And yet the circle makers seem to have transcended this and have reached another dimension of understanding of fundamental circularity. Next slide, please. This is a very important slide for me. And this is a quintuplet, fundamentally a dice 5 spot. The difference between the quintuplet and the dice 5 spot is that the dice has 5 circles of the same size, and the quintuplet, the crop circle quintuplet, normally, but not always, normally has a central circle or a mother circle which is larger than the satellite or daughter circles. Next slide, please. Here's another one. This is known as a fat quintuplet, in that the outriders, the satellites, the daughters, are heavier and closer together. Next slide. Next slide. This was a formation at Upton Scudamore, which was absolutely crucial in an understanding of what was going on. There was some amazing work done by John Martineau, which shows, next slide, this was an accurate measurement of the circle, and he overlaid a pentagram. And the pentagram, if laid into a circle which defines, which is the outer circle of the formation, sizes the mother circle precisely by the arm crossings of the lines of the pentagram. Now, this was an insight so revolutionary and so fundamental to the study of crop circles. I have asked John repeatedly over 30 years, how the fuck did you find that? And he said, he can never answer me. He can never answer me. I mean, and it's a matter of real astonishment for everybody who's approached the subject. This one diagram with this formation opened the subject explosively and starts to explain an enormous volume of crop circle work. Next slide, please. The other thing about the quintuplets, which is very important, is that prior to the arrival of the quintuplets in the 80s, everything was circular, circles or rings, and we never understood that the revolution of the quintuplet defined something new, which was the straight line and the right angle. Suddenly, the quintuplet developed the right angle. Now, there is no right angle in nature. And again, I turned to John Martineau and said, here we are, the quintuplets perhaps are defying nature. They are using an orthogonal geometric 90-degree structure for the first time. And he said, oh no, there is something else. There is a crystal which forms cubes. And here it is. This is a natural crystal, which is the only other occasion I could find in nature where right angles occur. Next slide, please. So in the early 90s, the quintuplets showed me that there was an enormous intelligence behind the crop circle phenomenon. The quintuplets relied on a set of rules, and these are the rules. First of all, there is a right-angle geometry. They're based on the orthogonal. Next slide. The mother circle is always bigger. Next slide. The satellites, or daughter circles, are always the same diameter. Next slide. They're always an equal distance from the mother circle. Next slide. And then the sibling of the simple quintuplet was the Celtic cross, in which the 4 daughter circles are held on an orbit line. And there are 2 rules about that. One is that the orbit line always passes through the center of the daughters, and second is that the orbit line is always thin. Next slide. And I worked with Alan Brown on a series of posters, which here I've got these. And Alan Brown is, I mean, you meet some brilliant people, or I've met brilliant people through the circles, and one of them is John Martineau, who's a dear pal, and the other is Alan Brown, who's another dear pal, and a great designer. And we worked together on these posters. Next slide. Now, this is a range of quintuplet measured diagrams, and you can see that they are obeying those laws which I've set out. And what, above all, seems to be impressive is they all have a poise and an elegance about them, something about them proportionally which seems very harmonious to me. Next slide. That's another set of them, and you can see towards the top there are some Celtic crosses with orbit lines. Next slide. And here is one where the tumulus, this historic tumulus at the center, has been incorporated into the pattern. Next slide. Another Celtic cross showing the swirl of the lay of all 5 circles. Next slide. And this is a quintuplet of quintuplets. Next slide. And here you see the theme has been developed astonishingly to show lays and overlays of the quintuplets. This is quintuplet of quintuplets over quintuplets. Next slide. this is starting to really stretch it and incorporate it into more sophisticated patterns. Next slide, please. And this is a beautiful, recent formation which is remarkable in that both the mother circle and the satellite circles are bounded by a single ribbon. Next slide. Now, the other thing that occurred in the 90s was the incorporation of the quintuplet motif into larger formations. Now, if you say, what is the most widespread crop circle form? It has to be the single circle. And there have been hundreds of those. But the second most significant one is the quintuplet. The quintuplet has been so widespread. And next slide. There again is incorporated in the center of this formation. This was at Stanton and St. Bernard, just a little way from here. Next slide. There again is an explosion of quintuplets. Next slide. And here is again the stretching of the theme. The other important thing about the quintuplet, at the end of this series, I'll be talking about the squaring of the circle, which I think is the heart of the message for me. It seems to be the heart of the communication of the crop circle authors. They are playing with the idea of the square and the circle, and traditionally in sacred geometry and sacred religions, the square has always been the symbol of hard material reality and the world. The world is based on chairs and rooms and houses and square stuff. The circle is God, divinity, spirituality, all that is. And I believe the message we are getting, and I'll be going into this more seriously in lecture 4, the message we are being given is to look at the relationships between squares and circles, between the world and heaven. And the squaring the circle, or circling the square, is a marriage, a reconciliation between the material and the spiritual. Next slide. Here's formation which the red line shows the way that formation in fact embodies a square which has exactly the same length of perimeter as the circumference of the circle.